Hi there and welcome to Code Framer. In this video, we will understand about Python Tuples Data Type. If you are already following this tutorial, then you must be already familiar with Python list data type, which we understood quite extensively in previous videos. Python tuple has almost all the features of a Python list, except that the items of a tuple are not mutable, and this is the most important difference between the two data types. So, whenever you have a requirement, where you don't want to make any changes in your data, but only want to access them as and when required, then you can always consider using Python tuple. Basically, tuples are used to store static or fixed sequential data, and Python lists are used to store dynamic sequential data. Other than this particular difference, Python tuple features are almost similar to Python list, in terms of storing and accessing data. For example, both tuple and lists store collection of items, which means that they are sequential data types. Both of them can store items with different data types, and all the items of tuple and list are accessible using the indexes. So these were some of the common features of a Python tuple and list. Let us also take a look at some of the differences now. The first difference is, Python tuple is represented by opening and closed parentheses, whereas Python list is represented by opening and closed square brackets. Second, items stored in a Python tuple are immutable, whereas in Python lists, they are mutable. Third, list consumes more memory, whereas the tuple consumes lesser memory, especially when we have a larger number of data to be stored. Due to this, the data access in tuple is usually faster compared to lists. Fourth, size of a Python list can be modified using methods like append and insert, whereas the size of a tuple cannot be modified, which means that the size of tuple remains fixed after the creation. So these were some of the common points and also differences between the features of Python lists and tuples. It is extremely important to understand these points, because it will help you to decide about which is the most appropriate data type to store a particular kind of data as per your requirement, while working on any solution design in the future. Let us move forward now to see how we can declare a Python tuple, and also to see the different operations that can be performed over a Python tuple. So as I mentioned earlier, that the Python tuple can be declared inside parentheses. For example, if we want to store a list of fruits inside a variable using the tuple data type, then we can write my_fruit equals, then the open and close parentheses, and then inside the parentheses we can store our data, just how we used to store it in Python lists with square brackets. Let us say if we want to store the names of a few students and their age, then we can write student_name equals Sam, Mike, and Ryan, inside parentheses. And their age can be stored in student_age, 10, 12, and 11. So you can store items of any data type inside Python tuples. You can also store items of different data types inside the same tuple. So, a Python tuple is as flexible as a Python list to store static data of different data types. One more important point to remember while declaring a Python tuple is that when you are storing multiple items inside parentheses, then automatically the interpreter will consider it as a tuple, but when you are storing a single item, then you must add a comma after the item. For example, if we store only the name Ryan inside parentheses, without any comma, and then if we check the type, we will get a string data type. But, if you add a comma after the name, then the type will be tuple. So always remember that if you want to store a single item inside a tuple, then always give a comma after the item. Let us explore some of the other features of a Python tuple. All the items inside a Python tuple can be accessed using indexes. Basically, Python tuple also follows the same indexing order as Python lists, which means that the indexing starts from 0 to incrementing order from left to right, and it starts from -1 to decrementing order from right to left. With this in mind, if we want to fetch the second element from left, then we can write student_name, square bracket, and inside the square bracket, we can pass the index of the item we want to fetch, which is 1. This will fetch the name, Mike, from the tuple. Similarly, if we want to fetch the third element from the right, then we can write student_age, square brackets, -3. This will fetch the name, Sam, from the tuple. So using the index positional values, we can fetch any value from the tuple, from both the directions. Just like lists, we can fetch a range of items as well. For example, if we have a group of fruits stored in a variable called fruit_list, stored in a Python tuple, and if we want to fetch a fruit from position 2 to position 4, then we can write fruit_list, square bracket, starting point of the index from which we want to fetch the data, which is 2, and then we can give a colon, which acts as a separator between starting index and ending index, and then finally we can write our ending index, which is 5. Please note here that we have given 5 as the ending index. This is because the Python interpreter will exclude the ending index and fetch all the items before the ending index, which means that the items from index 2, 3, and 4 will be fetched from the tuple. Similarly, we can fetch the range of items from right to left. For example, if we want to fetch items, banana, grapes and orange, then we can write fruit_list, square brackets, then our starting index, which is -4, -1. Remember that index -1 will be excluded, and items till index -2 will be fetched as a result. I hope that this is clear. Do let me know in the comments if you have any doubts. Let us move on to some of the other features. I mentioned earlier that we cannot modify the items of a tuple, and I still stand by it. But if a need arises, then you can use this hack to modify the items in a tuple. For example, if you have a tuple which stores certain programming languages, now if you want to modify the item Pascal to JavaScript, then all you need to do is to convert this tuple into a list, because items stored in a Python list can be modified easily. So, in this case you can write v equals list, and then pass the tuple prog_lang as the argument. This will convert the tuple into a list, and store it inside the variable b. Now using indexing assignments we can modify the item Pascal to JavaScript. So, we can write b square bracket 1 equals JavaScript in double quotes. This will modify the value Pascal to JavaScript in the list. Now we can modify this list back to tuple by writing a equals tuple, and then pass the list b as the argument. Now if you print a, it will have the modified item JavaScript inside the tuple. Using this hack, you can basically perform all the operations available in list, also in a Python tuple. I hope that this is clear. If you try to make such changes directly inside a tuple, then you will get the type error, which is, tuple object does not support item assignment. And assignments are not supported, you won't be able to make changes on the tuple items. I hope that this is clear. Let us move to the next example. Items of a Python tuple can also be accessed using for loops. So if we want to loop through a tuple, student_name, then we can write for name n student_name, and then in the next line with indentation, we can print the name. This will print all the names stored in the tuple, one by one. So if you want to perform a common task across all the items stored in a tuple, then you can loop through the item and execute the operation. We can add two tuples with the plus operator. For example, if we have tuple 1 and tuple 2, where tuple 1 has few items and tuple 2 has some items, then if we add these two tuples with a plus symbol, then it will concatenate the items of both the tuples into a single tuple. So basically you can concatenate the items of two tuples just by adding them using plus operator. Tuple has only two built-in methods, one is count and another one is index. Using the count method, we can find the total number of occurrences of any particular item stored in a tuple, and using the index method, we can find the index of any particular item's first occurrence in a tuple. Let us take the example of student_name. As you can see, that we have certain duplicates of the name Mike in this example. Now if we want to find the count of the name Mike in this tuple, then we can write student_name dot count, and then parentheses, and inside the parentheses we can pass the name Mike as a string value. This will return 2, because we have two occurrences of this name in the tuple. And now if we want to find the index position of the name Mike in the tuple, then we can write student_name dot index, and then we can pass the name Mike as a string value. This will return 1, because the name Mike first occurrence is at index position 1. I hope that this is clear. Keep practicing more with tuples and explore other possibilities as well. We have covered almost all the functionalities available with tuples. Let me know if you have any queries in the comments section. I really appreciate your zeal to learn new things and make your basics strong. You must be proud of yourself for taking these smaller but stronger steps towards progress and mastery. If you found this video helpful, then do hit the like button, share it with other code lovers, and subscribe this channel to master programming languages. See you in the next video, and until then, happy learning!